Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Hump Day. We are getting a lot of folks to join our session this afternoon. So thank you for joining. We're going to kick off now. This webinar roundtable is called How Startups Can Survive and Thrive in a Downturn. It's a very timely topic, and we're really happy everybody could join us. A quick reminder before I introduce our incredible panelists, you can submit your questions anytime via the Q&A button in the Zoom webinar. And now, without further ado, and as I announce each panelist, you can magically appear on video. First is Jess Lee, a partner at Sequoia, a great friend. She was formerly the CEO of Polyvore, before that at Google, and she's amazing. Jess, wave to the world. Awesome. Dennis Crowley, also a dear friend, a legend in New York tech, co-founder and chairman of Foursquare. Previous to that, Dodgeball, which was also acquired at Google. I think you guys may have overlapped back in the day. And last but not least, a legend among legends, a living legend, Alan Patricof. Thank you for joining. Alan is founder of Apex and Greycroft. He's got an incredible book out, by the way, right now called No Red Lights. We're going to drop the Amazon link in. It's a mandatory purchase for everybody on this webinar. It's an incredible read, by the way. I was just telling these guys I read more of it than my wife's latest book, Don't Tell Her. Alan's also running the marathon this year, running the marathon this year at age 88. So he's an incredible inspiration to us all. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Alan, I'm going to kick off with you. You know, with more than half a century in venture capital, you've invested through more recessions than anyone here. How do you think this moment compares to past downturns, and how worried should we be?
Well, thanks, Nihal, for being so gracious in your opening remarks. I am living through this like everybody else, and my new firm, Primetime Partners, which is focusing almost all on startups, we see that the issues you're talking about. But what's concerned me for the last year or two is that almost everybody I deal with, and I don't want to refer to people on this call, did not live through 99 to 2001. And they have a very positive attitude. Everything is going up, and every entrepreneur sees everything the last couple of years going up. And most venture capitalists see everything going up. Somehow 2008 didn't hit as much. So I think that there's still a moment of euphoria that people haven't come to realize, that there are cycles, and that we are probably in one now. And the question is what the depth is. And so the question is to get ready for it. But how this compares so far, mild compared to what could be. But clearly it's a moment in time to get hold and to prepare for it. Even if it hasn't hit you yet, you may have it happen, but in a way it's a positive that think of it as I hate to refer to the Supreme Court decision, but maybe, they let loose 2 months in advance this terrible Roe versus Wade decision, let a little air out of the, maybe, what we've seen the last 2 months is kind of decompressed a little bit and made people look carefully, more carefully than they had been.
Jess, Polyvore, I know, when you took the helm was kind of right around the time, post kind of financial crisis. Like when you were running the company, kind of what was going through your head at that time?
Yeah, we started before 2008 and had a pretty good ride, found product market fit, and we were growing. Then 2008 hit, and I remember seeing the Sequoia RIP Good Times presentation, and it had a lot of the prediction of the coming crash, what was going to happen. I remember a slide that said death spiral, and the founders who react quickly would survive versus those who were too slow. And I just remember the most compelling thing from it was like move quickly. We were really small at the time, so there wasn't a lot to do. But I remember thinking like, wow, this grave warning is pretty scary. We did manage to eke out a Series B at that time of like $5 million. Now what is, might be a large seed. And I think what happened was we got really, really good at growth, organic growth. So we figured out before the term growth hacking existed, how to grow on Pinterest, grow on Tumblr, grow on through SEO. And I think some of those practices and being forced to do that made us one of the consumer companies that like stuck around for longer and was always able to like thrive on our own community talking about us. And I think hopefully that's something you'll see now with less capital available, with like you really need to eke out your survival. I think you'll see hopefully stronger companies built. Yeah.
Very interesting. So it made you more disciplined probably during that period. And Dennis, also, you started Foursquare right around the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I was just coming off of, I just left Google at the time, and I was kind of decompressing, trying to figure out what to do next. And I remember around that time just being like, there's no companies, I did just like the hype of that previous cycle was kind of ending. And I was like, there's no companies I really want to go work for. Let's start something else. Let's start from scratch. And, what we experienced like in the early days of Foursquare, the first, 1 year, 2 years, 2009, 2010, is that there was a lot of people in that similar mindset, right? That were working at bigger companies and bigger jobs, that were, looking at what was happening in the market and the economy as kind of a chance to reset their own, I guess, like internalization of their careers and what they wanted to do next. And so it was easier for us to go and recruit talent and build a pretty amazing team in New York, which just at the time hadn't been done from a startup. I remember when we were starting Foursquare, everyone said, oh, so this is great. You guys started in New York and you're going to move out west. And it's like, no, we're not going to move out west. Like, we live here. We're going to build this company here. It's like, yeah, but you can't build an engineering team in New York. It's like, well, we'll figure it out.
So it was probably helpful in your recruiting, right? Like during like building it early, like at that time, right? When folks were on the market, there's a lot of access to talent.
Yeah. I mean, Google, if anyone had built a world-class engineering organization in New York, it was Google. And, I was just coming out of Google, and the first couple of hires we had were all out of Google. And the joke was always that it took us about a year or so, but we reproduced the lunch table that we used to sit at in the Google cafeteria in New York. We just did it at Foursquare World Headquarters down in Cooper Square, just poaching one person at a time, mostly because they were just ready to leave. Like, they had spent time at Google and they were ready to move on to the next thing.
Totally. Actually, it was interesting. An LP this morning said, I asked him how long this thing's going to last. And he said, the longer the party, the longer the hangover. And this party was 12 years long, or more. Alan, I mean, you've seen a few of these iterations. I guess how long should we be prepared for this? And like, I guess what's one piece of advice you have for younger founders, who have never seen a bear market before?
Well, I think one of the bigger differences today is that I do think that most companies that I've seen have adequate cash, or more than they did in the 2000 period or 2008 perhaps. And I think I can remember with horror, every single week there was one of the companies in the portfolio that couldn't make Friday's payroll. And I haven't seen a company yet. I'm sorry, I didn't realize my video was off. I haven't yet come across a company either recently or the last couple of years that have not been able to make a payroll. So I think they're probably, even though everybody is out and now wants to raise a follow-on round, I think in general companies are, for the most part, and you can't generalize, but I think for the most part companies have more cash, are more comfortable, have more running room. Then there's not as much of this running out of money. The other thing I would say that these kind of times give you an opportunity for a halo or shadow over your head to say, listen, we have to cut. And it's a good opportunity to cut, as GE used to do. Remember, every year they cut the lowest 10%. I always thought that was a terrible policy, but that's how they kept on upgrading. It was, they got rid of the lowest 10%. Well, I'm not saying you do that, but if there are people you've been thinking about getting rid of, you could do it under the halo or the shadow of a tough economy and getting tighter for it. The other thing is, I think there's as Dennis said, it's easier to recruit in times like this because there are going to be more people around. They're not as not arrogant in thinking they're going to have 5 opportunities. They may accept your offer a little quicker and a little more realistic basis. And the other thing is, I'm not sure how much it applies to people on this line, but I always remember learning from, it was either Procter, I think it was Procter & Gamble, but maybe Unilever, saying the time they increased share of market was always in bad times. And I know it's not the same as a startup, but this is a time when people will be making moves that may give opportunities for people to go in and capture a piece of business they might not have been able to get under other circumstances.
Yeah, there's a quote that somebody told me, I'm probably getting this wrong, but it's like easier to overtake other cars on the highway when it's raining.
Okay, great. I like that much better than what I said. Much shorter.
It's also a lot more dangerous to overtake other cars on the highway when it's raining. But Jess, at Sequoia, like, what are you guys telling your companies? I mean, obviously, debt spiral in 08, everybody has seen kind of the 50-page memo as well from last month. But what do you tell your companies right now?
Yeah, we called an all hands for the entire founder community about a month ago, and then went through 3 or 4 different topics: forecasting, fundraising, and then leadership in uncertain times. And I think it's no different than what Alan was saying. Like, this is the time to overtake, but you just need to survive first. Folks are all in different places. And so I think there's no one single piece of advice, but the first is probably survive. And then, I think the creativity breeds constraints. And I think now is finally the best time to recruit. Honestly, that's probably one of the biggest benefits. I think we've been in this crazy talent war for so long, where you're competing with FANG, with crazy offers, everyone is recruiting everyone. And now suddenly we're entering this time where I think you'll finally be able to get a high concentration of really great talent and folks who are more missionaries than mercenaries. So I do think that, I think there's gonna be a little bit of a freeze for a while, it seems, but this is the moment to take advantage of the fact that if you do have the capital and you do have product market fit, now is a great time to find great people.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis, in that vein, I know right now, you're kind of back to creating, you have a few different projects on your plate. Feels like it's a great time to kind of build, not to steal, Mark Andreessen's words. It's time to build. But what are your thoughts in terms of like building now, versus like a year ago, 2 years ago, when there was like crazy access to capital? There are a lot of tourists on the investor and the founder side, and now they're gone.
Yeah, I feel like there's certain times in the cycle where there's just a lot of noise, right? And I think there's been a lot of noise in the crypto space and the NFT space. And because there's so much noise, like, it's easy for people to look at those spaces and be like, oh, it's just all nonsense. It's nothing great there. But there really are interesting projects that are going on. They're just buried under a pile of things that maybe are less interesting or won't survive. And I think these periods, what they do is, they're like the Great Reset, right? Like, some of those companies go away, some of them get acquired, some of them get acqui-hired, some of them go out of business, and the interesting ones survive, right? Like, I don't know what the version of this quote is, but like, there's always capital for good companies, right? Like, capital's scarce when like you don't really have something interesting. You don't really have something that's working. You don't really have something where people can't see the product fit. But like if you're kind of toying around in interesting areas, then opportunities arise. I think one thing that's different is back when we started Foursquare, there was something new at the time, right? Like the iPhone was brand new. That was a big technological change. Like we were just kind of messing around with different mobile stuff before then. And there hasn't been anything new in a while. The watch, VR, AR, like it's there, but like what's going to be the next thing that kind of resets everything and gets people excited again? Is it some mainstream application of crypto? Is it Apple's magical glasses? Like, is it something else, right? So when we talk about like when do you pin the end of this cycle, it might be just another generation of hardware, which then spawns another generation of experiences that need to get built.
And that could be, I mean, the mobile analogy of '08 could be the Web3 analogy today, right? Potentially. There are a couple of questions on the investment side that came in, and Alan, for you, Prime Time or Greycroft, kind of, how do you decide in this environment which portfolio companies to keep funding and which ones do not meet a performance standard? Does the discussion today inform portfolio companies to optimize kind of that, that funnel, or like how do you think about that?
I think two of the biggest problems in the venture business, and probably in every industry, one is how to say no to someone and do it gracefully, and the second is to deciding which companies you want to keep supporting. I try to follow I don't want to say rule because I certainly violate it all the time, but I think about it, a company that I've invested in a first round, and say to myself, do I still think the management is as good as I did when I made the investment? Do I still think the market opportunity is as big as I thought it was? Do I think the product development has come along as much as I had anticipated? I mean, how far are we behind? And the economics work as well as I thought? As the margin analysis or whatever I use as my metrics, has that changed? Now, it's very simple. If all four of those, if I don't like the management, the products development is slow, and the market is, et cetera, that's an easy decision. The problem arises when you have one that still is valid, or maybe even two. And I'm not making a rule, but I'm just saying it's a guideline, because I think one of the big problems is rounds A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I mean, they go on, and I know that there have been cases when, round H has worked, but if you allow me, I can tell you a very, very quick joke. And there's a book called The Green Hills of Africa, written by Ernest Hemingway, and they're sitting around the fire one night, and the white hunters are out shooting lions, and one turns to the other and says, "Do you think they got one?" And he says, one shot, maybe, I'm sorry, 3 shots, maybe 2 shots. No, I got to reverse myself. 1 shot, maybe 2 shots, yes. 3 shots, heap shit. Which in effect was applying that if you got to shoot 3 times, you got a lion, you probably missed it. So I think that, it acts as a little caution for later rounds. I think, one should be more circumspect about, and we all get tied in, we all fall in love with our companies, our entrepreneurs, and it's a hard decision, but I think this is a good time for discipline.
Yeah, maybe the only thing I'd add is I think the most precious resource is time, and in particular the founder's time, right? Like it's so hard, right? So blood, sweat, and tears going into your company, right? I think sometimes you have to have the honest conversation of like, where is this company going? If you've put 4 years in, where are we going to be in 4 years? And usually that conversation is not that much of a surprise, and you just really need to figure out like where are you going, and do you want to keep going? So to me, that's all usually the ultimate driver.
I want to fix my joke that I screwed up. 1 shot meat, 2 shots maybe, 3 shots heap shit. I think you get it anyhow. And it is true, when if you have 1 round and that's all you have to invest. You can be sure that company is going to be some form of winner. And I'm not saying you need 2 or 3, but it does help you discipline yourself.
Jess, has your bar gone up in this environment?
I don't think the bar has changed. I think prices have come down basically, but the bar I think is still the same. We're still looking for outlier founders, enormous markets or potential markets, and a lot of hustle and velocity from founders. Yeah, it's just now there aren't 20 term sheets or like a $100 million valuation on a pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-launch company. So I think it's really just that prices have adjusted because the capital has dried up. I mean, we just did, we're still definitely open for business. Did an investment, a pre-seed 2 weeks ago, and we actually just announced the launch of Sequoia Arc in the U.S. It's sort of our take on an accelerator for Sequoia, but that opened yesterday actually.
Awesome. Yeah, I heard an analogy. It's kind of been a moving target, but the $20 million A, which is standard dilution of 20%, kind of 100 post, is now, the $13 million A, right? So like the 100 million post kind of has gotten compressed to kind of 60, 65 posts. Let's see where it ends up. But yeah, to your point, prices are coming down.
One of the things, Nihal, one of the things that happens is, and I don't want to say it's definitely happening now, but entrepreneurs tend to have obviously a very positive outlook. They wouldn't be doing that. And they look around and they see what people raised money at last year. And they are still, my experience has always been, in a bad time, they are kind of hung up on a previous plateau. And it takes a while till they emotionally get accepted to the fact that, if they started out to raise at 100 million, then as you said, it's a 60 million valuation. It's not an easy adjustment, and they need time to absorb that and live with it. And so when the market declines, the IPO, the stock market declines, you don't automatically see private deals adjust to it overnight. It takes a while. And I think we're going through that period of adjustment right now, to getting used to the fact that the whole level set may be lower.
How, Dennis, founding businesses now, how are you adjusting to this, to the new level set? I mean, you have to adjust.
Both the projects I'm working on, Street FC and Living Cities, like we've successfully raised capital, so we've got enough to keep us going. Like there is a conversation about, hey, do you want to, should we consider raising more just to get us through the next 2 years, right? You give yourself 18 months runway, but you really want to give yourselves 24, a little bit more. But I feel pretty fortunate that we were able to button both of those up. But it was happening during the time when things were kind of winding down a little bit, and I think it goes back to the point that, like, hey, we're a pretty good team and we've got a pretty good story, and I think we were one, for both projects, we're examples of those companies that, like, oh yeah, this thing has a good chance of succeeding, let's invest in it. I think the thing that's totally different, and I think both Jess and Alan were hinting at it, is the talent market is just totally different, right? Before you'd go talk to someone, like, there's no way I'm going to leave my gig at Google. And then they're like, well, no, there's a hiring freeze, and I don't know what's going to happen. And even if I was looking, I'm not going to get 6 job offers, and you guys are pretty early and you have enough money. So yeah, this is a good path for me to take. Just be able to have a different type of conversation with a different level of seriousness that we maybe weren't able to have 6 months ago, 8 months ago with some of the same people.
Very interesting. Yeah. And even like the unicorns and decacorns, with a lot of folks that have their options kind of underwater now, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
Especially what's happened kind of last year, with like these insane financings. So I think that talent is like, kind of feels like they're ready to go.
Also, a lot of people were pretty crypto rich, 6 months ago, that aren't so much now. Like, oh, maybe I should go get a different gig. Maybe this isn't the nest egg I needed it to be.
I get, you mentioned something interesting, 18, 24 months runway at Eniac. We're kind of trying to have our portfolio minimum 24 months, if possible. That means going back to, you know, even reopening the last round, and adding cash to it. What other things, and this is kind of open question for the panel, what other things should founders be mindful of in this time besides runway?
Spend. Just what are you spending on, and how quickly are you spending it on things? I think when capital is easy to get, you're less mindful of it. And then when it's like, hey, we got to make this stretch a little bit longer. Maybe we shouldn't, do this on site. Maybe we don't need to go to this conference. Just things here and there, and also just being mindful of, okay, we've got a team of X amount of people. Like, we're not gonna double that. Like, we're gonna make it go with a couple more people, but not double that, right? And just kind of being realistic about the hiring expectations.
Times like this, you get more efficiency out of the employees you've got. That's for sure. And it's also in times like this that if you're selling a soft product or service that is not necessary. I mean, like, I hate to say it because I believe in it, but if you're in the PR business or marketing services, it's so easy to cut that, and it's so easy to cut your ad spend, even though it may hurt you and it may be the wrong, but you reach for those kind of things, and it's more short range than long range thinking.
I also think you have to pay very close attention to the mindset of your customers. Like, your consumer company, all your customers suddenly feel probably poorer, going through what looks like it might be a recession. And then on the enterprise side, budgets are getting cut. Your friends are being laid off. And so I think the customer mindset's also shifting towards less of you don't want to be a company that learns 6 months later that you were in the nice to have category all along. Do you need to shift your product positioning to be a little bit more about efficiency or cost savings? Do you need to brand a little bit differently? I think it's going to hit consumer more quickly. It'll show up right away, but I think in enterprise it's going to take a while to trickle down.
Yeah, those are incredible takeaways.
Dennis,
Nihal,
Dennis wanted to comment.
Oh, I was waving to my kids. Sorry. Trying to hide up here, and I see them in the window. I'm like, hey, I'm alive.
Dennis, don't try that at Sotheby's or Christie's. You'll find out you bought
it. That's hilarious. But yeah, runway, spend, discipline, your customers. It's interesting, right? A lot of the B2B SaaS revenue forecasts now are seemingly being affected because they're selling to other SaaS companies, right? That are cutting spend. So it's kind of like, okay, maybe time to reforecast, maybe look to.
I'll give you a suggestion,
yeah.
not the, the everyday suggestion. I think this is a very good time to get out of your seat in your chair in your house and go meet your customers. And actually do some visits in person and get a sense of what is happening at the customer level, rather than try to interpret over Zoom. It has a different dynamic. I know it's a lot of extra work, but you can pull a lot of market information by, visiting the customer.
I love that. Yeah, that double clicks on what Jess said about kind of really getting to know your customers, kind of reinvent that relationship as times are changing. Well, guys, we are at time. This has been a really action-packed and very informative panel. Again, really appreciate all of your experience. Like I said, I think I posted in the chat out. I was very nervous getting up here because you guys are legends and friends, and really appreciate your time in the middle of the week, in the middle of a bear market. And I'm hopeful that a lot of these nuggets folks will take away with and inspire them to build better companies during this time. You can reach out to any of these incredible folks, Dennis, Alan, and Jess, on Twitter. They're all active, and that's probably the best way to get in touch with them. And you can reach us at Twitter as well, at Eniac VC or Nihal Mehta. And thanks to Anthony and Nihal for putting this panel together. And have a great rest of the week and a great holiday weekend, everybody.
Thanks
Great.
for having us. Thanks for
Thanks.
coming.
Yeah, thanks. Super fun.
Bye.